What's up guys, it's Roberto from Dormied. In today's video, we're going to talk all about right side bend. Not only what is it, but also what are some of the flaws that it can cause, and what are some of the benefits that it can actually give you when it's done right. So I don't blame you guys if you don't remember, but I talked a few weeks back about how I started on my golf journey a couple of years back, was actually picking up Ben Hogan's 5 lessons, and then, attacking my golf swing in what I thought was the right order for me and what worked for me. So one of the first things that I worked through was having a better plane, better shoulder plane. This club here represents my plane. Having a better shoulder plane on the way down. So Ben Hogan talks about how he prefers to have a little bit of a steeper plane on the way back as compared to on the way down. So one of the ways that he talks about it is that if you are swinging on a certain plane on the way back, on the way down, your shoulder or your arms shouldn't actually cross over into that plane on the way back down. It should actually be on a lower plane on the way down. So here's on the way back. Ideally, here's on the way down. What I thought this meant to me was, okay, well, I just gotta go back on the same plane and just simply get on a shallower plane on the way down. Unbeknownst to me, that actually ended up throwing up a whole bunch of tilts into my swing. So here's right side bend. We're simply bringing up our shoulder closer to our midsection without moving our hips forward. Okay, and really without moving them up or down, or at least very minimally. So here's my right side bend, not right tilt, right? So notice how the hips went forward. That's tilt, that's bad. So when it came to my own swing, I noticed that after I started feeling that sort of shallower plane on the way down, unfortunately I was throwing up this massive amount of tilt, which got me shooting the club from the inside, outside, and then just flipping it. So this is sort of what it looked like. Let's see if I can't replicate it. So this is me attempting to add right side bend to save my steep swing. So pretty steep, and it actually created a whole bunch of strain on my side here. It wasn't until I saw a couple of videos, and I'll put the link below, from George Gankas on how the tilts in the golf swing actually works. So as you can tell, this is just 2 exercise bands. You can use one, really, it doesn't really matter. I'm using 2 for comfort. I've got an alignment stick, which is nothing more than a, I think they call it a driveway rod at Lowe's. It's all of, I don't know, $2.50. So I want to put this around my hip right here, so I have a pretty good representation of how my hips are moving throughout my swing. So as Ben Hogan would explain it, or at least how I understand his book, is that on the way back, you go back on a certain plane, and on the way down, you got to come back on a flatter plane on the way through. So where I got myself in a lot of trouble is when I started adding right side bend, but I wasn't paying attention to what my hips were doing, and I was actually having my left hip go way higher than my right hip in a move that was something like this. Is probably familiar to a lot of you guys there. So what that meant for me is a lot of pushes, a lot of push draws, and a lot of snap hooks when I try to save the face late. Another thing that can happen is actually if you don't have enough side bend at all, which was me initially. I'm going back just fine, but then never quite side bending, which means you have to get out of your posture and do something crazy here late to even make contact. So those are 2 of the very, very common misses that happen when you don't have a lot of control between what your hips and what your shoulders are doing. So if you've got this guy coming up higher on the way down, you're gonna have to do something to compensate and stay back. Now, one more very important thing is if you don't have the right amount of side bend, that might have a lot to do with the fact that you are actually moving side to side a lot on the swing and not staying centered and using more rotational force. Now, why I love this tool or these couple of rods is because they give you exact feedback on how the shoulders are moving relative to the hips. And for me, and what works best for me, is feeling that as I start on the way down, this lead hip is actually going to be lower than my trail hip as I start to rotate. And now on the way down, my shoulders are not going to go into massive right side bend right away. So what you're going to notice is that as I start on the way down, my lead shoulder is actually staying lower than my right shoulder. And we want that to happen all the way until, I'd say, when your hand is at about a 45-degree angle with the club right here before impact. So some would call that P 5.5. This is 5, this is 6, call it 5.5. So by the time we get to about 5.5, my shoulders and my hips are about even, and I'm free to just explode to the target. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that video on what right side bend actually is and what are some of the causes and some of the flaws that come up with the incorrect amount of side bend. On the next video, I'm going to walk you through a few drills and feels that I've worked on and I continue to work on to get me centered and using the right amount of side bend at the right time in the golf swing.